Thank you so much. I think it's been extremely interesting. And of course, I have to share why I got into this. And it was basically a little bit more like that. Hello? Like that? Good. No, I just wanted to share why I got into this in the first place, working here for the UN, but in Colombia. And it was basically because DPPA offered, a session on behavioral science where Andres presented his experience, right? Not his experiment. And I got really into it. And then I was a little bit frustrated at some point when we were approaching the 5 years anniversary of the peace process here in Colombia. And I saw that the UN was really much engaged in this high-level diplomacy approach. And, the Secretary General was coming to Colombia and everybody was turned into preparing the visit, right? It was a very high-level visit. And it was also in the context of extreme polarization. I mean, remember that we just had finished protests, and still we were under previous, government where peace was not evident to be in the agenda. So I thought, what can I do, to bring engagement to the people, to engage the people into celebrate the 5 years of the peace agreement and to actually understand how the peace agreement has, actually leveraged positive results to people in the field. And then I invited Andres, because I wrote his name, and it actually took me a year to reconnect back to him. And I invited him, and then he said, why don't we call Vlado, this journalist, and create something really crazy. I'm not going to tell you everything because that will be a separate presentation, and I know everybody has a lot of questions, but just to let you know that we're also trying to do things here with little resources. We need to maybe do more of, the whole evaluation to see what's the impact, but we're trying to do it as well. In any case, I don't know if you have any questions. I have a lot of notes here, so if you don't have any questions so far, of course, I can push some to the speakers, but I'm sure that people want to ask. Any questions? It could be in Spanish or in English, no worries. Yes?
Crystal, are you still there? Ahí está Crystal. Perfect. There's a question for you. Sí, te traduzco.
Gracias a todos.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Muy buenas las presentaciones.
Interesting afternoon, nice presentations. I wanted to ask Crystal, when she asked those questions, whether they were able to identify then when they were saying that the former combatants was 50-something% threatened by having signed the peace agreement. If you know who was threatening the civil population, because they the ones who didn't sign the peace, that is the civil population, or what do you know, or the question was just kind of generic.
Andrés, o no sé si hay una persona técnica, pero no vimos ni tiempo se oían un poquito, pero ninguno de los dos se oyó bien. Entonces no entendí la pregunta, perdón.
I can translate if you want, but basically is if you know who is behind the threats of ex-combatants. You said that a number of ex-combatants raised the issue that they were threats.
No sé si alguien puede repetir la pregunta o en inglés o en español.
So there was a survey, exactly. There was a survey that said that ex-combatants were
Crystal, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear now. It's just the
No worries.
the
Catalina is gonna.
Yeah.
Catalina va a repetir la pregunta.
Perfecto.
Tal vez, ¿verdad que sí? Debe estar que usted ya está descargado. Puede ser eso, sí.
Hello? So basically the question is, if you know if the ex-combatants share information about who might be behind the threats to their lives, because that was one of the questions of your survey.
We do have that information. That was the you're talking about the individuals who had left
Tenemos
criminal
esa
groups.
información.
Some of them were receiving threats from we have a breakdown basically of different armed groups who were carrying out those threats, or at least the people that the actors that those individuals believe are responsible, but we haven't finished analyzing it yet, so I can't share it, but I'm happy, and this is not just specifically to this question, I'm happy to be in touch with anyone going forward, and so this is the kind of analysis that we would share in the next few weeks and months as we get further into the data, but unfortunately I'm not able to answer today.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we will be in touch with that question later on. ¿Alguien más?
Voy a hacerla en español. Es una pregunta para Martin.
I will ask this question in Spanish for Martin. Martin and Maria Elisa Pinto. I have worked in peace construction with artistic tools in Colombia, and it was quite interesting in your presentation. These things you talk about focusing on the large decision makers at the diplomatic level and the UN. And also this morning I was reminding Henry Moraine, who talked about a study in the universities, and that universities were quite reluctant to be study themselves. We study everybody, but we don't like so much when we're the subject of a study. And I was wondering a lot if, right, in the people who are part of the UN or those representatives of the government of that level, if there have been studies carried out. Because he said that in Colombia, many of our decision makers and politicians studied by the president are people who have gone through traumas, and they have suffered trauma associated to war. So I don't know if in that level of representation there have been people with this kind of trauma, but I mean, have you analyzed in a way, or have you carried out a study about emotions, prosociality in that high level of level politicians and things like that?
And I was listening closely to that comment on the academics that like to analyze others, but they don't like to be analyzed themselves, which is, interesting. Let's put it that way. There is a study done by the University ETH Zurich that has covered a range of interviews with high-level mediators, and I'm happy to share contact details. I'm not sure whether the study is already public, but the Swiss have done a study with high-level mediators, and that's not necessarily kind of heads of states that you would like to see analyzed, right? Think about the heads of state or the permanent members of the Security Council. So you have to do this in a more remote way, right? As you have described it also for the academics. So you would find other ways to study the object without having necessarily the object participate voluntarily, right? You do this remotely. And this is something we have, not just us. I mean, look, journalists are studying body language and how the word holds truth, the action, and the action holds truth, the word, for instance. So kind of those kind of indirect ways are always part of political analysis, right? Where we look at what's the promise and what's the action, right? So I would say that's kind of basic toolkit work when you work as a political analyst, apart from what we also carefully do, looking at body language and other aspects. Now, when it comes to new technologies, there's actually an interesting, and that's open source, happy to share that as well, approach where sentiments or stance detection are not, so when we fit an emotion to a political stance, for instance, right? So like or dislike, right? And then we have negative or positive sentiments, but where we also get a sense for how things are said based on the way of how things are articulated. Because issues like irony, for instance, when I say something, this is a very good question. That's a good question. Or when I say that's a good question, that I'm saying the same things but differently with different resonance against a certain baseline. There's a data set that the Institute of Informatics of Japan released that we looked at, where this is actually put into action, where you can use sound filters to get a sense for, is that somebody talking in an ironic way in that particular language or in a serious way. So those are things we're looking at because those are out in the market now in a very open way. So I hope this answers your question.
Okay, so there's another question. So, Sandra, perfect. Professor Ponania will be our closing question. I'm sorry. Yeah, so we can get some coffee before to organize the other auditorium.
Okay, this is a short one for Crystal too, about the results that you presented were very, very interesting and open many questions, many new questions. There was one about the interest that did you perceive, or do you think that your interests were reflected by the government or by the the guerrillas, the ex-FARC in the bargaining process? And it was it called my attention that it was similar. 63% people saying that no, that actually their interests were not represented by none of the main groups. And I was wondering, well, what are their interests? I don't know if you ask in another question, what are your main interests? Maybe they will say the same interest. And I mean, just maybe if I take a step back and we look at what I consider my interest and then ask everyone about my own, their own interest, maybe we find a common ground. I don't know. It was just about that. If you also ask, maybe in the group, in the qualitative measures, you find anything similar.
So, Crystal, did you get the question?
So thank you for the question. So we haven't analyzed the data from that perspective. I think one thing that occurs to me that we could do would be to try to, because we have a series of questions before the questions on the peace agreement that aim to understand people's experiences of conflict, different experiences, for example, of victimization, presence of armed groups in their communities and different things. So we could see if there's a relationship between, for example, different types of victimization and whether or not they felt that their interests were represented in the peace process. Or if, for example, presence of different armed groups had an effect on it, or there's a lot of different ways that we could analyze that question. We didn't ask the question that you're suggesting specifically. We didn't ask people like, what were your main interests at the time in the peace agreement? Mainly just as a due to the time limitations that we had, because we were trying to cover a lot of different topics in just a half an hour of phone survey. And I also think that, yeah, a qualitative follow-up, like a focus group or something, would also be another way of delving a bit deeper into that particular topic. So yeah, but it's on our list. We just have many different things on our list, and where we struggle to prioritize sometimes.
Well, I was given the task now to try to wrap up and to give some conclusions. And I think it's very interesting, of course, and thank you for the three of you who gave us brilliant presentations. First of all, one thing that I would like to underline is that to the surveys that were presented, we can see that still there's a lot of polarization, right? And that means that there is room, basically, for trying to talk to the other, try to see how, I don't know, I wouldn't like to say manipulate or, as you say, do mind control, but maybe, to try to engage the other. And I think this was obvious on the different responses that Crystal got from her, with Andres, with her field sort of work. So there is plenty of room, and we see it politically as well. We can feel it in Colombia politically. There's still 50-50, basically. It is not like a majority of the country that is for the peace agreement yet, and it was evident as well after the plebiscite, right? And I think as well then, on that respect, that there is room then to use these innovative tools that they have presented to us. And of course, I was thinking about, for instance, the presentation of the report of the Truth Commission. How did it manage actually to talk to the other side? Was it a tool to create dialogue and to promote some sort of understanding of the other? And I think we have a great challenge there. But I've been thinking about some ideas, but I'm always sort of wondering if this actually is mind control. Or I'm trying to bring someone that doesn't want to talk about this, and I have to sort of cheat it to bring it in. But I think we have to become sort of aware of this, and to be creative and innovative, and not have the fear, to try to bring these ideas, new ideas, to obviously to make peace and to make it more sustainable. So I just want to close there, and thank you so much. Yeah. It was
okay, everybody. It has been a marathonic, credible, and unforgivable time. Unforgettable, sorry. I can forgive. Since we're talking about peace, I can forgive. Okay, so just wanted to close for our streaming audience. We had almost 400 people connected throughout this week. 2 days, we had the excellent support of SEGIS and ATG. A translator, he has done an excellent job, and he must be tired too. So we're gonna we're letting him go. So SEGIS team, thank you so much. Also, it's time to obviously remember Emil, who we are here for. Many of you, I'm glad, many of you, I'm seeing faces, met Emil personally or through the pandemic. And Boaz, we are really grateful because, making such a long trip, being so generous with us throughout not only our shared research, but also all the stuff that you have been contributing to. Martin, also to you, coming here. Sandra, especially, with her family. You guys have been extremely generous with your time and all the things you prepared to do here. Dr. Diana, without your support, we wouldn't, and literally, without your support, we couldn't make it. Hernando, you suffered a lot through the process, but I thank you so much for your support. We will see Dr. Gomez later, so we can thank him again publicly. Ingeniera Marcela from our medicine faculty, Claudia from the economic team, Santiago and Martina, his small daughter, who has been crucial in the last weekend. She was very important in this. Angela, also you guys did so much. All the professors who presented around the world, especially, as I said yesterday, people that I hadn't had the chance and the privilege to meet, like Professor Lopez, who has done so much for peace in our country. Also, Henry Murrain and other people who are very engaged right now in, with crazy agendas, and they were able to be here, especially Catalina and all the team at the UN, the UNDP, who made possible to get our first conversation started on Tuesday with our very admired peace builders. So Shainer, I asked Shainer to give some words in the next panel, closing words, because I think we are not the ones who have to talk to the politicians and celebrities that we're going to talk to at the end. Shainer, we appreciate so much your work. We know sometimes you can feel isolated while you build peace in the territory. As many of our partners here from different organizations that have been for years, sometimes without money to do stuff, and we know that your conditions are not the best, and we really, especially in the last 4 years, and that's my personal opinion, not Javeriana's, I'm speaking for myself, that basically the peace process, the implementation got freezed. You guys kept it on. You guys have been fighting for us, the people who believe in peace, and I wanted to say thank you to Shainer in representation of all the big teams, leaders, ex-combatants that are on the field, and local public officials that believe in the PEDETs and the Grupos Motor around the country. And yeah, I'm not gonna get emotional. Maybe it's because I'm exhausted, so I'm about to cry, so I'm gonna stop there. And then we're gonna see the premiere of a personal conversation that Juan Manuel had with Emil in Medellin, that I haven't seen it, Boaz haven't seen it, so for sure we're gonna shed some tears. And again, to all our security, our team in security, they have done an excellent job. All the secretary auxiliaries, they spent the whole time and made this possible. So, and again, SEGIS and ATG, thank you so much for your excellent work. Mary, if you're there, again, we admire you so much. We are very thankful, and again, thank you everyone, and we'll see you in the next year, because as Martin said, this is the first international seminar on neuroscience, cognition, and behavioral economics. So next year, Pablo Abitbol from UTB University invited us to make it in Cartagena, so we can make it more fun and you guys can travel. And we're gonna try to get the funds to do it part in Cartagena and part in Montes de Maria, so we can go visit that community, and that will be logistically incredible, but I'm kind of crazy and I do this stuff, so for sure we'll get it done. And Boaz will come with his kind wife who lended Boaz to us for a week. So Martin, hopefully you too and your kids can come to Colombia. So, okay, thank you so much. Bye-bye.